Well, we now move on and we have a special address from EY on IFRS 17, Moving Beyond Compliance. Please, Martin and Vanessa.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So maybe just a quick introduction about Mata and myself. We have been working with a lot of insurers in the region around IFRS 17 implementation over the last 3 to 4 years, both in the capacity as advisor as well as auditor. So today we're just going to share with you very briefly on what is happening in the industry around IFRS 17, and more importantly, what does it mean beyond the compliance area. Maybe before we just get into the topics, can I just get a show of hands on how many of you are familiar with IFRS 17, what it is, or have been involved in your organization on this exercise? Okay, that's good to know. Well, more than what we expected.
Yeah.
IFRS 17 effective date already coming into effect in most of the world. We are seeing companies actually still working or trying to actually finalize the figures, right? I believe a lot of you probably would have already seen investor stories, communications around the IFRS 17, looking at the numbers, but it is probably not there yet. We're still working, and we're seeing companies spending time working on it. So other than putting things into production, areas that we are seeing companies working on includes getting it audit ready, for example, right? Putting in the governance, putting the controls for the numbers. Still working a lot, looking into what does it mean for the business from a product strategy angle, business planning. Does it actually have any implications to your pricing? How do you actually, analyze the results, given that we are going to move from a cash basis to revenue basis financial statements? So there are a lot of these things which we are seeing companies working on. I think this morning we also talked a lot about AIs and the use of data. With IFRS 17 coming in, one area which definitely we are seeing is the availability of a lot of data, right, at the very granular level. So companies are starting to actually, look into this and say, hey, look, I used to analyze my my profitability at maybe say a product level, a distribution level. But now with all these information available, I can look into at a lot more granular level. For example, I know which policyholders can actually generate most of value for me, persistency. How do I actually serve the customers better? I can even look at, say, agent level, right? With the availability of data, saying, okay, which agents are giving me the most profitable business? How do I actually make changes potentially to some of the compensation to reward and promote the right behavior from my distribution channel? So these are all things which we are seeing, right? And not forgetting that KPIs. So is there a need to introduce new KPIs? Is there a need to actually replace some of the current KPIs with IFRS 17 matrix? So a lot of these conversations are currently happening within the industry, okay? So what we have done is we've looked through, of course, a lot of the investor communications so far. And in the old world, in the IFRS 4, in the IFRS 4 world, if we think about KPIs, there are typically 3 buckets: growth, earnings and returns, and then capital and dividends. And if we look at the investor communications till date, these buckets probably still remain, right? And the question is then, are there going to be any new or additional KPIs which companies need to actually start tracking, need to start looking at? And how will that affect all of us, right, who are people, working in the industry, from how we manage, how we look at the business? Very common question is, okay, you have CSM, and then today you have EV, right? Is CSM going to actually replace EV? In the event where for certain products types where EV and CSM may actually behave differently, right? How do we actually look at business? How do we actually design our product strategy around it? Implications to OPAT, right? How do I actually make comparison of OPAT for different companies? And what about for those companies that are currently probably not looking at OPAT? What is the implications? Dividends, is there any changes, potential changes? How does the regulator actually look at IFRS 17 results together with your solvency results? So we are seeing a lot of discussions being formed up, discussed in the industry, right? But today I think we wanted to actually focus a bit more around day 2, post IFRS 17, right? What does it mean for the industry? What are some of the other things that we need to actually think about embedding into our business? Martijn, over to you.
Thank you, Vanessa. So we have been spending a lot of time the past 10, 20 years talking about this new accounting standard for insurers. And I don't know about you, but I've been doing this for about 25 years. I still remember the first discussions in 1997. It wasn't called IFRS 17. It was called the new accounting standards for insurance liabilities. And you know that something that takes 25 years to come to fruition is probably pretty complex. And it involves finance people, and it involves actuaries as well. So the big question is now, has it all been worth it? Right? When this new standard was launched, right, in 2018, it's now implemented, gone live for many of you in 2023, and still in several countries in Asia, like India, China, Thailand, that were still over the next few years to do. The idea was, when I spoke to the standard setters, International Accounting Standard Board, who came up with a standard a long time ago, that this would roughly be the same cost as the implementation of the regulatory capital standard Solvency II in Europe. That cost about 2 billion, the industry, for Europe alone. So let's take 2 billion for Europe times 2, about 2 billion, 4 billion. Maybe, let's be a bit more positive, 5 billion. Now you multiply it to the world. By the way, the US has its own standard called LDTI. Let's say 10 billion, right? So, so that is where it's right now going. So 2 billion is what is the idea of what will become 5 billion right now. My best estimate is that it has cost the industry about 20 billion to implement this. Now, that's a lot of money. Frankly speaking, if we had known it would cost that much, I don't think we would have done it. However, now that the investment has been done, I think the big question is not only about how do we kind of, make sure we're compliant, is how do we move beyond compliance? How can we leverage some of this information that we're getting out of IFRS 17 for the benefit? Because what IFRS 17 does, number one, it makes your numbers more comparable. That's a good thing, especially for investors who don't understand insurance. And number two, it makes your numbers more transparent because you have much more disclosures, much more granular information. It separates the investment income from your insurance liabilities, from the underwriting. And that's a good thing, right? Because we all like more transparency. But I would say to get that value out of IFRS 17 investments you have made, there's 4 things you need to really focus on. And therefore, I'm telling insurance companies, you're not fully done yet. Don't stop when you have got your first IFRS 17 compliant financial statements with the auditor signing off. Congratulations, well done, has been a long journey. But to really reap the benefits, you need to do 4 things. And the 2 things on the left are more focused on efficiency of doing things. And the other 2 things, which I think is really the holy grail, is about getting more value out of it. It's about the effectiveness. So it's compliance versus performance. The first thing that I notice is that a lot of insurance companies are still doing their financial bookkeeping very manual. We spoke about it before. It's a manual industry. A lot of the work behind the scene is done manually. A lot of reconciliation is done manually. So we need to adopt and use and embrace technology. There's a lot of technology out there, and the insurance company have been so busy implementing this new accounting standard, they're trying to stabilize it now. Then the next chance is to optimize it, but there's a lot of opportunity to automate it. And I've seen some benefits. I've seen companies literally move their level of automation from 10% to 90%. And the technology is there. So number one, doing smart close, right? And doing it much faster because most of the companies are struggling to close their books even in 10 to 15 days. And that's just not good enough. Number two, related to that, is automating your controls. Because when you talk about implementing your controls, your financial controls, those are also very manual. Large insurance companies will have anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 of controls that they need to execute every time they close the book. So this is where automation comes in as well. So process optimization, control automation go hand in hand. And really now is the time to do it. Don't stop, right? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get it right. If you do that well, then we can finally start shifting some of these resources away from just producing the numbers to what we all want to do is to understand the numbers, to analyze the numbers. That requires more time. So that's then about two things. Number one is making sure that we got the right KPIs, and Vanessa has been talking about that already. There's a new set of KPIs about there, but the benefit is that with IFRS 17, we have much more detailed insight information at product level, at channel level, at agency level, at country level, at investment level, at underwriting level. So it allows us now to really understand performance, right? And then we can understand it as management and we can explain that to the market. But the real holy grail to me is financial planning. Because if you think about it, what is IFRS 17? IFRS 17 is based on models. It's based on models of future cash flows. We are the only industry that is producing its numbers based on future projected revenues, especially for long-term business, like life insurance business. So since we are sitting on that wealth of information produced by the actuaries, if we now apply the right scenarios to that, using that forward-looking data, we can do what other insurance can't do, which is really give some insightful insights in the what we think the financial numbers are going to look like going forward, and understanding the sensitivity to certain shocks around interest rates, geopolitical risks, every other thing that we want to project on there. And that to me is the real insight. So for me, the winners are those companies that already are pretty good at producing the IFRS 17 numbers, have managed to stabilize it, have done the automation, made it more efficient, and start to harvest all that information and leverage all those investments. And we can see some of the bigger insurance companies starting to do that now. So I think we haven't seen everything yet, and I'm very optimistic about IFRS 17 finally being the one that's generating value instead of just costing us money. So there's quickly still what I want to share, some 4 tips on how to do that. And there might be time for one more question if there's a question. So 4 tips I want to leave behind for you. Number 1, don't wait until IFRS 17 is fully done, right? You need to start thinking also about how you can take it to the next level, right? So don't wait until it's fully stabilized. Think about how can I do it better. It's continuous improvement. That is the key. Number 2, as I mentioned, leverage those investments. You spent a lot of money on it. Let's get some money out of it now. And that's about thinking about how can we use our current existing capabilities and then exploit them in those new areas and start to make the insurance industry more attractive from an asset class point of view, from an investment point of view. Number 3 then, don't go into the gadgets straight away. I see often companies spending so much time on the tools, right? For me, it's first mindset, then skill set, and then tool set, right? Don't start with the tools. First start with changing mind, applying the new knowledge, the new language, and then putting new technology in place last. And then last but not least, cut it up in pieces. Have an agile approach. Don't try to do everything at once. Implement it in stages and get better and better at it. Thank you very much. Is there still any questions?
Thank you very much for that presentation. Please join me in thanking EY.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.